And not just because I have a nice room with windows. This isn't my permanent office, though. This is just where I'm streaming.
I have a new on-camera anxiety now, by the way.
Oh, yeah?
After seeing Ben Affleck talk about the Batman thing.
Oh, nice.
Like, I don't want to get the Affleck face. You can't, like, yeah, when somebody else is talking, you can't be, like, daydreaming.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah. All right, well, I'm just seeing an ad roll on DDOCast, so... But I'm guessing that's because we went live.
Probably.
Hey, there we are.
Hey.
I can see us. Can you see us? Yep. Are you on? Do you have Twitch up? Okay. Well, Mary's here, so it looks like Mary, you can hear us okay so far. Why don't we? If you are in our chat room right now, please let us know if you can hear us okay. If everything sounds all right, we'll do our best to adjust things on our end here. Have your guys? I believe we are ready to go. You guys good?
Yeah.
All right. Let's do it.
Sweet. All right. I'm going to kick it off officially. Hello and welcome to DDOCast episode 440, recorded live on Friday, August 12th. I'm your host, Patrick. With me this week, we have the devs for Ask the Devs.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having us on.
Welcome, guys. Yeah, we like to talk about Dungeons & Dragons online nearly every weekend. You can watch us through Twitch, YouTube, the DDO forums, iTunes, or from our website at DDOcast.com. DDOcast is hosted by Cyber Airs, the awesome podcast hosting network. Shows are usually available within a few days of recording. Next show will probably be next weekend, and you can stay up to date following us on social media pages, specifically Twitter at DDOcast. On the podcast this week, Ask the Devs. Hi, guys. Welcome.
Hey.
What are you going to ask us about?
Well, let's start with...
who we are, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, who are you?
So I am DDO's community manager, Cordovan. And then I will let you guys introduce yourself.
I'm the executive producer for DDOs, Severlin on the forums.
I'm No Worries. I'm doing the stuff like Cannith crafting and the loot for this update.
I'm Steel Star. I do a lot of different things, content and systems.
And you're Patrick from DDOcast.
Yes, I am Patrick from DDOcast. Yeah. We're doing this a little backwards, so usually I can see everything. This time I can only see myself, which is usually what other people have to deal with, not being able to see me. So it's a little weird.
Well, if you have a window open for Twitch, you can see us that way. Yeah, the internet doesn't like it when I try to... My computer internet doesn't like it when I try to do everything at once. So. Understood.
Well, yeah, so let's start with... We'll just jump right into some questions. Update 32 hit Lemania this weekend, just yesterday. And it'll be up for, I believe, just through the weekend. And the primary focus is Cannith crafting. So let's start with talking about Cannith crafting. What are the design goals with Cannith crafting?
Oh, everyone's looking at me. All right. The design goals of Cannith crafting was we started the plan last year to bring all of our different loot into usefulness with one another. We had problems where random loot wasn't useful, named items were all over the place, and we didn't have a good, easy way to make new ones or make new effects. So we started with the back end of doing new scaling effects. That led into redoing random loot, and it began our new approach to named loot as well. With all of that, Cannith crafting, which was already falling behind, was pushed way further behind. So with this update, we're trying to bring Cannith crafting back into line with random loot. We're giving it the same scaling effects, and I think it's going to be a much more useful system for players.
So how is Cannith crafting going to fit within the larger design of random loot, named loot, and raid loot? Where does it fit into that kind of puzzle?
Cannith crafting is great for building your own pieces when you can't find what you need in those spots. It can create the top end of the normal range of random loot, but that means random loot, if you get lucky, can still have effects that are slightly stronger, which leaves a purpose for that. And named loot is handcrafted and doesn't have to follow these same slot requirements of effects, so those are generally just a bit more powerful and a bit more flexible, and so all three should be able to become combined on the same player at the same time.
So it sounds like the idea is that with Cannith crafting, it'll be able to let you craft most of what you could get in random loot with a little bit, with the time and effort involved you can take some of the randomness out of that.
Yeah, that's correct. There's a few effects that are exclusive only to random loot, and there are a few effects exclusive only to Cannith crafting, which gives them both some extra flavor, but the vast majority are in both, and Cannith will let you just build what you're trying to find while you can't find it yet.
And random and Cannith loot, they observe the same rules in terms of slots. Is that true?
Yes, they have the same slot requirements for all the effects.
Okay. And I saw that we've in Lemania that one of the things that we're fixing is the DR breaking portion of like good, evil, and that stuff as well.
Yes, those 3 will go back to doing the DR breaking on creatures, which a lot of people have been asking for, and that will take place both in random loot and Cannith crafting and should be retroactive to any items that have those new scaling effects on them.
Which, if I'm not mistaken, that was kind of one of the big things that you were trying to do with the shift to the new loot system, where it kind of scales, that you can go back more easily and do much more retroactive changes and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's a lot easier for us to fix effects. It's easier for us to fix the scaling, to adjust balance, and it's a lot easier for us to just add new effects as well. The system's a lot easier to work with.
Much easier on our end.
That's great. We like it to be easier for you guys, so you can give us more cool stuff.
Yeah, more loot all the time.
Yep.
So what can players do on Lemania now? What will we be able to do in the future?
Right now, most of Cannith crafting is there. They can do all the scaling effects. Rune arms and Cannith challenges haven't been implemented yet. That's the next big step. But they should be able to create everything that isn't a non-scaling effect. So, which really is only a handful, maybe a dozen, that are non-scaling. So those aren't in yet, but you can basically create almost all the items you can get from random loot right now.
Sounds fun. After Cannith crafting launches, is there intent to see more things added into it to random loot, or are we going to be kind of holding steady for a while?
I think we are always trying to keep our eye on any adjustments we need to make for random loot and Cannith. Now when we adjust effects, that'll affect both at the same time, so that makes that easy. And we'll always be on the lookout for new effects and new things we can give players and new advantages we can give with Cannith crafting. So it's not just going to be a one-off and we're done. We'll keep updating the systems.
What about flexible shards? Because I know that's something that's kind of coming up in the conversation a lot. There's not, the slot restrictions are going to be much more observed in Cannith crafting now. Is there a plan to implement that later, or are you guys kind of planning on staying with the slot restrictions?
Right now, we're planning on staying with the slot restrictions. I think we're already seeing feedback from players now that they've got their hands on it that they can create very powerful items. If we were allowed flexible shards as well, this would really start to invalidate a lot of named loot because they could just put these powerful effects everywhere they wanted, make all the items that they really wanted, and named loot would suffer a lot. I think there needs to be some restrictions there, and they're getting a lot of power, and it's already helping them combat the randomness of random loot, and I think that's a good start.
Awesome. Anything else you want to say about Cannith crafting before we move on to other topics?
No, but we will have a dev chat in Lemania tonight from 7 to 9, and of course we have 2 different spots on the Lemania forums, one specifically for Cannith crafting, so we're looking for all the feedback so we can get this right before it ships.
I would just
7
add,
to 9 Eastern time?
Correct.
Yes.
And I would just add that if maybe you're not that familiar with the Cannith crafting system and you need a bit of a primer 101, we did put together a sort of a basic overview on the forums to just kind of get you started to preview Cannith crafting. So if you're a little hesitant because maybe you were just like, I don't know about Cannith crafting, let me let the wiki people figure it out, or something like that. Yeah, we can get you started, and you should be able to go on to Lemania and check out Cannith crafting without too much issue. One of the things we've done with Cannith crafting is made the process more streamlined and hopefully a little bit more intuitive.
You can, I think, too, go on the live servers now and kind of play with Cannith crafting as it is. The recipes are all going to change, but I think functionally it's more or less the same, isn't it?
Well, not exactly. I mean, there are some aspects which are similar, some of the user interface and that, but the way you craft and how the power is determined is really rebuilt from the ground up to match the new random loot system.
It is. There's a lot of commonalities. It's far more streamlined. The big difference is that now you put a minimum level shard on first, and that sets what the power of all the other effects will be. Instead of putting on strength 3 or strength 6, you just put on minimum level 15, then strength, and strength automatically goes to what it needs to be. So it's a lot smoother, I think people will see on Lemania than it is on live.
Will there be an ability for players to kind of upgrade an item or like recraft stuff on it, or do you have to start from scratch?
Currently, just like the old system, you'd have to start from scratch, either with a new item or disjuncting that one again. We haven't really talked about doing an upgrade system. I think that would again add an awful lot of power to Cannith, because you can just build the item you want and then just keep changing the level of as you level up. And I think that might be a different type of system we want to investigate at some point.
And then one more thing I should thought of. What about colored slots, like augment slots? How do those play with Cannith crafting?
Any augment slot that drops on random loot, when you disjunct it, stays there. So it's all about finding the augment slots that you want from random loot before you start crafting. Excellent.
I think with that, let's move on to the Slave Lords pack, which is coming with Update 32. I was interested, talk a little bit about why the Slave Lords. What attracted you guys to interpret that classic module as opposed to other ones?
Well, Slave Lords is something that certainly, when I was younger, was right in the thick of things in terms of how popular it was and how much we played it. Some of the other classic packs we've done. So Against the Giants was great, but we have Giant Hold, and all of the Drow series was great, but we have a lot of Drow content. But we really haven't done something like this before, so we were looking for variety. And I'm not saying that we won't do the other ones, but I think we were looking for something a little bit different. It's human-centric, which we haven't done in a while, so you have a lot of like the cool named Slave Lords, so that's an advantage.
Yeah, I'm at the moment working on a boss fight for that. That's a lot of humans, and players have fought a lot of humans over time, and so human bosses on the nose don't sound particularly interesting, but they're also some of the most versatile monsters we have on our end, and so there's a lot we can do with them. So it's going to be interesting.
The other thing about Slave Lords is some of the classic modules, as people have seen in Temple of Elemental Evil, if you're true to them, they don't make a great use of space, because the module map is mapped out to be this huge area, and the amount of content in it sometimes doesn't translate well. But that's not really the case for a lot of the Slave Lord spaces. It translates well, at least from what I played through it, to space versus content. There's a lot packed in there. Like, I loved exploring Temple of Elemental Evil, but you could wander through those halls for a long time before you figure out how to end the quest.
So what can players expect to see in these dungeons and with the Slave Lords pack?
I don't know how much we want to reveal.
Yeah.
I think that the ones I played through have good traps, like a higher amount of traps, so that's something that would be cool for people. But I don't want to talk about some of the surprises, because we want the players to experience it in game. What do you think? Something that
all I'd say is that if you've seen the module before, there's going to be some things that are familiar to you, but otherwise, yeah, I don't think we want to give too much away about it.
I guess if you could just say as an overview, the basic idea of Against the Slave Lords is kind of what you'd think. It is you against a group of slave lords who are, engaged in a fairly robust slave trade, and you're breaking it up. So you're going into their fortresses and hideouts and things like that, fighting them, freeing slaves. Like I say, as Sev said, we did actually a dev run-through this afternoon, just before going live here. There's some really cool traps, some large fights, lot of kind of slaver-type activities. If you're familiar with the module, I think you'll see a lot there that's familiar to you. Not everything, of course, because as with other classic packs, we don't have every, say, monster from the classic dungeons and that. But it's a very, I think, experience that if you played that module several times or at all back in your pen and paper days, first or second edition, you're going to see a lot there that you recognize.
What about structure-wise? Is this going to be like a couple of quests in the Hall of Heroes? We're looking at like one large quest. Like, you kind of mentioned that it's not going to be quite as expansive as Temple of Elemental Evil.
I think that running through it will actually take longer if you know how to get through Temple of Elemental Evil. Is my guess.
Yeah. It is currently structured, I believe, into 3 quests.
It's three separate dungeons, each of them
you can start them separately, and they're each pretty long. So I think overall, yeah, if you're doing a first-time run-through of this and trying to do all 3 dungeons consecutively, it might actually end up being longer than Temple.
Yeah. I think the first time you wander in Temple and you have no idea where you're going, maybe Temple wins out. But once you know where you're going, you can run through Temple probably faster on both ones than this. But, I mean, your mileage may vary. I haven't played this to death, obviously, like I have, say, Temple at this point. So.
And the 3 adventures are based on A1, A2, and A3, which are the 3 modules that we're doing.
Is it a chain, or you can do any one in any order?
It is a chain. You have to, the first time you're playing it through, you've got to play them in order, but then you can play them out of order if you'd like.
I wanted to pick your brain a little bit on some of the loot that's coming out of here. Specifically, some items are going to be able to go into multiple slots. I'm kind of interested in why you went towards that as a choice and what kind of led up to that.
Leading up to that is tough. I mean, it's you try to find new things you can do with the loot. You try to find things that'll be interesting that players haven't seen before. One of the aspects of this was trying to add in a bunch of flexibility items, and the best way to do that was items that players could craft themselves and that could go into multiple slots. So although there's 3 types of craftable items, you actually can cover 6 slots with them because they can be equipped in multiple slots. You can make 2 of them and equip them in each of the slots they go in at that same time. There's no restriction there. So it's just a different system they want to try out for players and let them have a reason to keep exploring the dungeon, keep collecting things, and to build the items that they saw fit for their character, and really give a lot of flexibility.
Seems pretty flexible. I was quite shocked when I saw that. I'm excited.
Yeah, I hope it goes over pretty well. First attempt.
Yeah.
It's always exciting on our end. Exciting. When we try something brand new like that and try to sort of break the mold a little bit, because sometimes it can be great, and then sometimes it didn't quite work the way we wanted to. So it's always sort of like, we wait and look and play through it, and we think it's going to be cool, but it's always up to the players on how they react to it. I think this is going to be cool though for them.
Yeah.
It was early in the morning. Someone was putting on their hats and boots and actually put their boots on their head and their hat on their feet. We're like, that's a great idea. So.
It was Tolero, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I'd like to talk a little bit about monks and favored souls. We know that the plan as it stands is monks are next in kind of the line of classes that are getting some work, followed by favored souls.
Yeah.
It was announced this week that monks are not going to be in Update 32. Can you give us an updated idea of what this schedule might look like
33,
and what we might see?
I'm hoping 33 will be monks. Right now we're evaluating whether we can actually do monks and favored souls both in the same update. Not sure we can. One of the problems with monks is it's very heavy because we really have to redo wraps.
Yeah, we have to redo hand wraps. There are probably a few things, not just in the enhancements, but the core of Monk that need a little adjusting. So Monk, compared to some of the other class passes we've done, might be a little more complex and a little more thorough. There are complex classes it is. So we'd like to if we can get both done in the same update, but we're still evaluating if that's going to be possible.
Like, one of the things we'd like to do is make hand wraps actual weapons instead of sort of the weird hybrid item they are. But that will require us to come up with tech that allows you to somehow change the existing hand wraps to something that you can use in your system. And that piece of technology is something that's far beyond most of the class passes. The other thing about Monk is, whereas Ninja Spy is fairly straightforward, the Shintao, because it scales somewhat off of spell power, but yet has a lot of pluses to staff, it's this strange hybrid tree that one thing we could do is change it to scale off of melee power, but we've been looking at it and we're worried that it will lose flavor. And we can also have the whole thing scale off of spell power, but I think that it will be a challenge for players to itemize at that point.
Right. These two trees try to do a lot, both Shintao and Henshin Mystic, but they try to do a lot in the same tree and end up doing most of it kind of okay instead of doing a few things really well.
Right. I mean, just the fact that it has 2 different kinds of magic types makes it hard for anyone who's not using universal spell power to itemize for. So we've been going back and forth a lot about how does the tree work? How can we make sure that it doesn't lose the flavor? I mean, obviously an easy thing is to make those scale off of, say, melee power, but is it really the same tree at that point? we're worried that then it will just feel like every other melee tree. So we're really looking into that and sort of in the discussions about what to do about that.
Bucks are kind of a tricky class just in general because they have so much differences, not just the hand wraps, but like the attack combinations and finishing moves and stuff like that is all kind of different than any other class. What about with favored souls? Have you figured out any kind of direction that you're looking at for that you can let us know about?
Well, I mean, obviously the big question of favored souls, what's the third tree going to be?
Right.
On one hand, we think it's cool that there are support trees for the players who want to play that kind of class, but the way that DDO works right now is that the players aren't playing a lot of support because they don't need them. So when we have harder content or we're doing raid stuff, that can be a useful tree. But as people are sort of doing their TR loop, it's less useful. So we're looking into whether we want to do some sort of hybrid, like
Right.
you do DPS and you can do support, sort of in the same tree.
Well, part of where they stand right now is there are two trees. You have Angel of Vengeance, which is mostly their spellcasting tree, and it actually does pretty well. It's just sort of behind. And then you have War Priest, which really hasn't held up with some of the melee passes we've done. Revamping that is also sort of a side benefit to Cleric as well. So a third tree, at least the way I would see it, would do some new and interesting things for Favored Soul while being able to support both of the other trees.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to take a step back, look at the game, kind of a little bit bigger of a picture. And we've talked about Update 32. DDO is 10 years old. That's awesome. Congratulations. What kind of challenges does that present for you to continue working on this game as developers?
Well, obviously, right now we're focused on a expansion, and we're looking forward in the far future. I mean, it's hard to talk about it this early, but we're looking for what we want to do with that. So that's exciting. We have some additional art resources with how the team is structured, and we can do some stuff that maybe the players haven't seen in a long time or ever. So that's one thing we're doing. We're looking at the 11th anniversary. All the kobolds in the game think that that's the most important anniversary ever. So I expect that the 11th anniversary is going to be big for all of the kobolds. So I don't know what that means yet, but I think that that's going to be a big deal. We thought it would be the 10th, but the kobolds assure me that the 11th anniversary is much, much bigger. So that we have that on the horizon. You know, we have more content to get to the players and some changes this year, and then we have the summer, so we're looking at that. We want to accelerate the class passes a little bit. I think the players have been really patient with that, especially where we've done systems with Cannith. At some point, and I'm not sure where this is going to happen, we'd like to redo the augment system. One of the reasons we've been hesitant to add new augments are not only is it painful on our end, that's not really an excuse, I'm just telling you the reality, but as we add new augments, it makes the augment recipes heavier and heavier, which makes it more likely to lag when you're crafting them. And a new system is something that would be great for that. But I think that the slotted system we used for green steel has some display things we have to solve before we do that. Like some of the players are telling us that they can't really look at the effects in an efficient manner. So we've had, some engineers starting to look to see how we can solve that. So all of that is on the horizon, but until we do due diligence on how much time that will take, it's kind of hard to say when that will be coming in. I think the biggest challenge, again, for augments, sort of like Moncan wraps, are will we do the current ones? So I think we'll keep the current ones in place, but we'll give the players an option of upgrading their items when it's convenient for them to do so, rather than having something where items like change in place, because I think that would be disruptive to the players.
I think I actually still have some items left over from the last time augments were revamped.
Yeah.
I would say you kind of asked a little bit about what it's like to continue to maintain a 10-year-old, an older game like Dungeons & Dragons Online. One of the advantages is that you have, so much time to develop a large amount of content. So DDO is large with many systems in that. You're also, in some ways, it's like building a city. Would you prefer to build a city from scratch, or would you like it to grow organically over 200, 300 years? So you look at something like Boston, right? If it all had straight roads, it sure would be a lot nicer for modern times.
No, then,
but at the
then
same
the tourists
time,
would
it
know where
wouldn't
to
have
find
helped very much against the fight against the British, right? So to some extent, we are doing city planning on a city that already has sort of built-in
Yeah.
roads and things like that we need to deal with when we're putting in.
Yeah, and it's kind of archaeology at times too, because there's a feature I have in progress that is going to remain nameless for the moment, but it touches a lot of content, both new and old. And in digging into some of the old stuff, you start to see how 10 years ago some of the earliest content got built, and it's very different from how we do things now. So it's really interesting sometimes to dig into a particular point in DDO's history and just see how kind of far we've come since then.
When you're doing that, you feel like you're playing Jenga. You're like playing with the lower level of
Yes,
the blocks.
Very much.
A lot of players are always saying like, we'd really like to see this, that, we want to see monks and favorite souls, cleric domains, and stuff. How do you decide which goals to pursue and when? How do you kind of balance all the awesome ideas, suggestions, and ideas that you have with actually focusing on things to put into the game?
I think for the class passes, that was based on player feedback for a while ago, actually. So the order of those came on pretty much feedback. I know that the monks right now are behind because we've done a lot of the other classes, but at the time, monks were fine in terms of they really weren't that far behind when you played certain kinds of monks. There were monks that were behind, but there's certain kinds of monks could still. But
Yeah,
now,
at the time we started the pass, right around Swashbuckler, monks were still king.
right. But it was, not all monks were, but their class definitely did well with certain strategies. 10k stars was monk, so that was a very popular build at the time. And then now we're basically finishing off that long process.
I just want to make sure when you're touching monk that you leave Steel Star's barbarian punchy build a viable option. So
Definitely.
Don't forget about that.
Otherwise, a lot of the decision making really is done the old-fashioned way. A lot of people in meetings, representing various factions, everything from community to finance to the development team in terms of available work hours and skill sets and the wants and needs that Sev has as executive producer to guide the game, forward. And so it's really just a matter of the same way you'd make it just about any other business decision. You get people in a room, you talk about it, you try to make the most informed choice you can and make as many people happy as you can.
Arm wrestling and dartboards.
Yeah.
A lot of it's player feedback. Like, we'll do things that we maybe wouldn't have normally done directly due to player feedback.
There was an interesting article, I'm not sure if you guys saw this, it was on Massively Overpowered. I thought it was really interesting. It talked about MMOs as being a collection of micro communities as opposed to larger communities that are fully integrated. Do you find that to be true for DDO, and how does that impact how you approach designing the game?
Absolutely. So, yes. For instance, there's a community that likes to do TR loops. They really find that their end game is running their characters up and sort of working on completionist and then developing alts. And then there's another sort of tier of players that really like to stay at max level and do the raids and the contents as they come out and try to get the very best gear at the end game. And those two are, I wouldn't say they're at odds, but it's a very different goal. Now, one of the things we do is, in some ways, we try to accommodate both, and that's why you see a lot of our content have both an end game version and something that fills a hole when leveling up, so the players who are on the TR loop have something to do, if that makes sense. And then we try to find the micro communities and each give them their moment to shine. I mean, we can't always do that every event, but if somebody wants to do, crafting, they'll have their crafting time, and we'll do a big thing like we are now with Cannith crafting. Whereas other people, will do a raid to make sure that they have a raid to keep up with. And then we just keep trying to cycle through those in a manner that, so everyone stays, everyone has something fresh to do in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah.
I've always said that when people say, well, what do the players think? Or, as a player, this is what we want. It's always, there is no they when it comes to a specific game community. There are a whole bunch of theys. That's not to say that you can't find trends and patterns in that, but there's absolutely dozens of different groups and wants and needs that you have to balance when you're making a large game like this. And in the community in particular, it's something that we deal with all the time.
Let's see. I want to ask a couple kind of fun questions for you guys. Are there any particular player achievements or character builds that stand out to you guys as surprising or unexpected or impressive?
I mean, watching the videos of sort of how people are soloing some of the content is always interesting.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things is we've had to watch that so much now as we've done the class balances that, at least for a lot of the classes we've done, I think that we've seen a lot of it, but not all of it. Sometimes players will come out with some sort of build that will surprise us. I think right now what we're looking for is the Kensei combos with a lot of builds well. So even though solo, it's right in where we want to do with the DPS if you're a 20 warrior, we've been watching and we haven't seen something super powerful that we're worried about it for Swashbuckler Kensei yet with a single weapon, but we're keeping an eye out on that. I suspect something is floating out there that the players have run across and maybe even aren't telling us. Not that the players would ever do that. So that's the kind of thing that we're looking for in terms of that. I think that one of the things that surprises me is just what the players can solo. It's just the sheer amount of stuff where they're getting through some of the content. We're like, wow, that's a lot of damage, and so we then steal their builds and replicate the effects on our side.
I remember seeing some incredibly high hit point character screenshots on the forums, and just going, "Holy moly, how in the world?" Right?
Yeah. I'm always surprised when I see footage or descriptions of people getting through our content in ways we had not anticipated. We in building content, we do our best to kind of plan for various outcomes and keep in mind, what if they try this, and then sometimes something comes along that after the content's been out for a while that just throws us for a loop, and it's always kind of fun to watch.
Yeah. All right. You're running Temple of Deathworm. You get to the second of the rooms where you can go in different directions. Do you choose red light, green light, the gravity puzzle, or the combat training room?
Red light, green light for me.
Yeah, I think red light, green light also. Those rooms are the only parts of Deathworm I didn't build personally. They were built by Rocking Dead way back when. But I always liked the red light, green light room conceptually. I really like running that.
Someone in the chat was asking, let's see, the Cane Corn was asking about the new races you're planning. Tieflings and Asmars are something you said that you were looking at doing. Do you have any updates you can share with us or direction you're thinking about going with those?
So I think that those are going to be the races of the expansion. They will require a lot of... So the interesting challenge, as I've talked about before for Tiefling, the horns and the tail, I think that we have tech that we can do that. I was kind of pushing, honestly, for sort of a Githyanki Kavzeri thing if we ever touch psionics, but a lot of the player feedback was that they didn't have the same attachment to that race as some of the core D&D races. So I think that if we do something where players have a chance to go to another plane, or planes, plural, much more heavily than we do now, that we'll definitely do the Tiefling ASMR route in
Yeah.
terms of that. I think one of the things that we're running into is like, what do we do with helmets? The biggest thing that we have left is with Tiefling that has the big ridged brow and the horns. Like we want to offer a whole bunch of different horns, but what do we do with the existing helmets?
Right.
We have to go through and adjust a lot of them.
Yeah, we get away with small amounts of clipping on some of those, like half-orc tusks occasionally protrude, but with the big horns like that, it's a lot tougher.
Right. So that'll be something that we're going to have to sort of work on as a challenge. Before then, one of the things that we're looking at, and I never would have considered going there, except that there's been a lot of player feedback for it, is we're seeing whether it's possible for us to execute on some sort of kobold race. I mean, a lot of the players have been mentioning it, and a lot of the threads where we talk about races, they love their kobolds. And so right now we're in the very early stages evaluating whether that's even possible, because the kobolds were never built as players. So there's like, it would seem easy, but it's not. We would have to do the kobolds from the ground up with the tail and with equipment and figure out whether kobolds should wear equipment. Maybe everything they put on is rags. We have to make sure that it feels like a kobold. And then also, what do we do about a kobold? Should the kobold be as powerful as another character? Maybe we should start them with fewer points and let them work up the hard way. Maybe a kobold is supposed to be harder than other classes, but eventually you can get to places. I'm not sure what we're going to do with that. I don't know that all the players would be happy to play a really hard kobold, so maybe we need an iconic version that is more of a normal character, so that the players that don't want to play kobold as hard mode can do that. So there's a lot of going back and forth on, do we want to do that? How much do the players enjoy that? Is it worth that sort of large amount of work? There's a lot of back and forth on that.
Speaking of iconics, do you have plans, or are you thinking about expanding the existing iconic selection?
No, not currently, unless we put out a new race and do an iconic as part of the new race.
Yeah.
I don't think that adding iconics to the existing races for the amount of work that would get us that much.
Yeah, on our end, it works best if we are doing that in tandem with another race like we did with Gnome and Deep Gnome. When we were putting together Gnome, we did some evaluation, decided that Deep Gnome, if done at the same time as Gnome, could be pretty efficient, but just doing an iconic from scratch of an existing race on our end is kind of inefficient and doesn't gain, I guess, that much on the player end that it doesn't create an experience they wouldn't otherwise really have.
Right. I mean, I understand that you can start at 15th, but when you're going on the TR loop, if we put an iconic Dwarf Wizard, say, I don't think that would be any different from a normal Dwarf Wizard. We would have to find a new race to create that had a new tree.
Yeah, there's definitely things we could do. It's just finding the right thing and the right time to do it in.
Makes sense. You've already teased quite a bit. Anything else you'd like to tease long term about what's coming up, or any fun things you're thinking about?
I probably have already said too much. And one of the things that I want to stress is that we're in the early stages of scoping. So a lot of this stuff might turn out to not be time efficient. So this is one of the reasons why people tell me not to talk about too much on these talks, and where I always fail is that I talk about stuff early when we're still looking into it. But I just want the players to sort of get an insight on all of the ideas that are sort of percolating in the background as we go through and figuring out, what the players will find cool.
I would say we are working on getting a new producer's letter out within the next couple of weeks or so.
Yeah.
And that'll talk a little bit more granularly about some of the update plans after Update 32.
Any timeline on Update 32 that you can share as we close out here?
We're kind of shooting towards the end of August-ish.
Yeah, either the end of August, or we'll push it well past Labor Day, and it'll be second week September. I think end of August is currently what we're shooting.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on what they find on Lamania, honestly.
Yep.
Our main concern is Cannith is a big system, and we want to make sure that the players have their chance to give feedback and find any bugs before we put it in.
Makes sense. Well, thanks for taking some time with us today, guys. Really appreciate you being on the show and kind of sharing where the game's going and what's coming, and we love the teases. Thank you very much for that. We're going to close out the show here, so thanks again to the devs. Huge thank you. It's always a pleasure to have you guys on the show. Thanks for the folks listening to the show, and thanks for all the other contributors for DDOcast. You can hit us up at DDOcast.com for show notes, MP3s, our calendar, previous shows, swag, and other fun stuff. If you'd like to be part of the show or have a comment on this episode, have a question you'd like to hear us answer, or a question maybe you'd like to ask the devs, or anything else you'd like to hear us discuss on the show, leave a comment anywhere where you can find this video, or you can email us at ddocast@gmail.com. You can also find us on social media and follow us latest cast updates. So until next time, may all your attack rolls be crits, all your tests level appropriate, have fun, and don't forget to check out Cannith Crafting on the Mania.
Yep, thanks again, everyone. Have fun.